What's up everyone? Today I'm gonna use this question in Cambridge IELTS 17 to show you how to answer the question, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? Let's look at the question first. It is important for people to take risks, both in their professional lives and their personal lives. Do you think the advantages of taking risks outweigh the disadvantages? I explained in another video that the use of outweigh means they are asking if the sum of the advantages carries greater weight, greater importance, or greater significance than the sum of the disadvantages. In other words, they are not asking you to count how many advantages and disadvantages there are and decide if the advantages outnumber the disadvantages. That's not what they are asking. They are asking which side is more significant. If they wanted to ask if there were a greater number, regardless of importance, they would have used the word outnumber. They would have asked, do the advantages outnumber the disadvantages? For example, there are many disadvantages of taking risks. You are trying something new, something you've never done before, so you may embarrass yourself. You may dislike the new experience, and the whole journey may cost you a lot of money. But what if the risk you take can change your life? This advantage is so significant, it carries greater weight than all three disadvantages put together. Therefore, the advantages of taking risks outweigh the disadvantages. Now you know what outweigh means. The next question is how many advantages and disadvantages we should write in our essay. Please note that this type of question is different from the question of what are the advantages and the disadvantages. If they ask what the advantages and the disadvantages are, then you have to say the advantages are this and the disadvantages are this and this. That is to say, you have to write more than one advantage and more than one disadvantage. However, outweigh is different. As I already explained, if they use outweigh, that means they are asking which side is more significant, not which side has a greater number. So it's 100% correct to write only one advantage and only one disadvantage. And when you can write only one, definitely go with this approach, because it allows you to fully develop your idea and meanwhile not to write too many words. Now let's start writing the essay. My opinion is that the advantages of taking risks outweigh the disadvantages. Body paragraph 1 is gonna be about one of the disadvantages of taking risks. Again, there are many disadvantages of taking risks, but we only need to pick one to discuss, and it's better this way. So I think a disadvantage of taking risks could be that it might hurt a person in the short term. The key point here is the short term, not the long term. So my topic sentence is gonna be, making a risky move may hurt a person short term. Here, you can use either short term or in the short term. Short term is an adverbial phrase, whereas the short term is a noun phrase. Both are correct. Next, we need to develop this main idea. If you find it hard to give reasons for your idea, you actually don't need to. You can directly use an example to explain your idea. The ex-examiner L. Simon talked about this method in one of his blog posts. He calls it an example-led paragraph. I will put a link in the description. I think this method is amazing because concrete examples are much easier to come up with than abstract reasons. So why may taking risks hurt a person in the short term? Take, for example, adults who are psychologically controlled by their parents because they still receive financial support from them. If they stop relying on their parents so that they can be free to go after their dreams, they may face the short-term downside of losing the comfort their parents' money provides. This example is about personal life. Don't forget that we also need to talk about professional life. You may write an example like this. If a person makes a career switch, they may have to start at the bottom and lose the high income their old job provides. This is okay, but you don't need to say the same thing twice. You can simply say that the same can be true of making a career change that involves a big pay cut. The same can be true tells readers if you make a career change that involves a big pay cut, you might lose the comfort your old job provides. The outcome is the same as the outcome in the first example. So far we've discussed the disadvantage. This paragraph is not done yet. We also need to explain why we think this disadvantage is not important. When writing this part, be careful not to write something irrelevant to this paragraph's main idea, which is hurting a person short term. For example, don't write something like this. However, I do not think that this should be seen as a major disadvantage in life because the risks they take can bring them new opportunities. This has nothing to do with the main idea of hurting a person short term. What we should do is explain specifically why hurting a person short term isn't a big disadvantage. It isn't a big disadvantage because it can pay off in the long run. However, I do not think that the short-term sacrifice should be seen as a major disadvantage in life, because it may pay off greatly in the long run. Now this paragraph is done. So from here to here, I'm discussing the disadvantage, and from here to here, I'm explaining why this disadvantage is insignificant. I will do exactly the same in body paragraph 2. I will first discuss one of the advantages of taking risks, and then I will explain why this advantage is so important. So I think one of the advantages is that taking risks brings you new opportunities. On the positive side, risks bring opportunities. This is the topic sentence. Now we need to develop this topic sentence. Again, I won't give abstract reasons. I will just give 2 examples. I will ask if we can use this method of directly giving an example after topic sentence to answer other types of questions. The answer is a yes. However, I mainly use this method to answer advantages outweigh disadvantages and discuss both views. Because for these 2 types of questions, if I give examples as well as reasons, I will certainly end up writing too many words. Especially for this question, you need to talk about both professional lives and personal lives. That's really a lot to write. Using only examples to develop your topic sentence really helps to cut words. But if I use this method to answer an agree or disagree question, I probably won't be able to reach the required minimal word count of 250 words. Now let's use only examples to develop this topic sentence. For instance, if Priscilla Chan's grandparents hadn't been courageous enough to move to the US from Vietnam, Chan wouldn't have had the opportunity to study at Harvard, let alone meet and marry Mark Zuckerberg. This example is about personal life. Now I will write an example about professional life. If Mark Zuckerberg hadn't dropped out of Harvard to focus on building Facebook, it would have probably been another platform rather than Facebook that became the world's biggest social media giant. Please note that both of the examples are about the main idea of this paragraph, which is new opportunities. And when you explain why this advantage is so important, you also need to talk specifically about new opportunities. So why are new opportunities so important? I think that opportunities like this are extremely important because they can be life-changing. This paragraph is also done. I want to point out that if you give reasons here, if here you say that the new opportunities people create can change their lives, you probably won't have anything else to say here at the end of the paragraph. This method of giving only examples is a big lifesaver when it comes to advantages outweigh disadvantages questions. It helps you cut words. It also allows you to have something to say when you explain why the advantage or disadvantage you are writing about is so important. Now let's move on to the introductory paragraph. As you probably know, in this paragraph, we can first paraphrase the question statement. Don't try to change the word important. Words like crucial and vital don't mean exactly the same as important. I always talk about using a different word form. However, if we use the noun importance and say it is of importance to take risks, it won't be as good as it is important to take risks. Don't be afraid of using the original wording. I will just say that it is important to. Even though changing the word form doesn't work for important, it works for risks. We can use the adjective risky. It's important to make some risky moves. In terms of professional lives, we can instead use career, and as for personal lives, we can instead say private life. In career as well as in private life. Next, we need to give our opinion and also introduce the two main ideas of the essay. The first main idea is that taking risks may hurt a person short term. I will use although to introduce it, since it is what we disagree with. Although this may harm a person in the short term. The second main idea is that risks bring opportunities. It allows them to create new opportunities. And then I will give my opinion. And I believe that this advantage far outweighs any potential disadvantages. This is the entire introductory paragraph. The conclusion paragraph is basically the same. We restate our opinion and the two main ideas. In conclusion, although taking risks may harm people in the short term, I believe this downside is greatly outweighed by the upside that the risks they take can create life-changing opportunities for them. This is my opinion, this is the first main idea, and this is the second main idea. Here's the entire essay. That's all for this video. In the next video, we are going to continue to talk about Cambridge IELTS 17. Be sure to subscribe so that you won't miss any of the new videos about IELTS 17. And if you have any doubts about the methods I use to answer an advantages outweigh disadvantages question, go ahead and check out this video in which I explain in more detail about this type of question. Thanks for watching. Bye!